You got a gun, got a big gun, got a gun, it's not a real one, and all you ever think about is running away, all you ever think about is trying to stay away from me.
Hello.
How's it going, sir?
Doing good, my friend. How about yourself?
I'm doing good, man. I know you. I know you're low on time, so we're just getting right into it. I'm already recording. Here's what I want to talk about today. So you get out of the Jorge Masvidal fight, which, by the way, brilliant fight, if I do say so myself. It went, I think, exactly how I imagine. I'll just ask you: did it go how you wanted it to go?
I actually felt like I could have finished him in the first round, or in the before the third round started, but I ended up breaking both my thumbs in the early on in the second. So I felt those right off the bat. I mean, I've had a lot of injuries in the octagon, and you don't feel it till about a few hours after the fight. But during the fight, man, I messed him up pretty good. I couldn't even make a fist going in the third round. So every time I throw a punch, I just re-jammed him over and over again. Ugh. So I wasn't able to put, power behind my punches like I wanted to. So if you go back and look in the third, it was more like I just kind of peppered him a little bit. Wasn't really hitting him with some steam. So, but I did what I could out there. Came out with a unanimous decision, obviously. Knocked him down in the first and in the second round with I think first with a side kick, and the second round with a right hand. But after that, it was just kind of like, just re-jamming my thumbs over and over again. But I feel like I could have finished him if I didn't have injured my thumbs. But it is what it is.
I mean, me personally, it was a good-looking fight. I mean, I enjoy it, and this was true in the Rory McDonald fight. This was true pretty much any fight you've been in. It's intelligent fighting, and sometimes it gets construed by people as being boring, right? Other times it works out and it's really exciting. But at the end of the day, it's smart fighting. It's not point fighting; it's smart fighting. You did not point fight against Jorge Masvidal. You just fought a smart fight. You stayed at range. You knew the kind of stuff he was going to do when he would jet in. You would push him back, and there you go. You were able to use. You were able to use karate against Jorge Masvidal much more than I expected you to. I really thought it was going to be kickboxing heavy, right? Because you have the adage of the styles, right? Boxing, karate do not mesh, right? Those are two things that tend to not go very well together, and it tends toward the boxer, not the karate guy. So I was wondering, I was like, man, I think we're going to see a lot of kickboxing here. Really, it worked. I mean, you were able to use kind of karate movement to keep him back, and I was surprised by that personally.
Yeah, well, especially with guys who kind of stand in front of you. Masvidal has that Muay Thai style where you just kind of meet in the middle, kind of stand there, kind of bouncing that front leg. Not a whole lot of movement there. So with the karate style, that moving in and out and switching angles, my opponent is not able to change those angles as fast. Yeah, they throw very hard. They throw very hard when they're in that stance because they can sit down really quickly, especially when it comes to leg kicks. But that's pretty much all they have. And for him to even throw anything, he would have to, because his legs are fairly close together. Yeah. When you're bouncing that front leg off the ground, most of his weight's on his back foot. So with his hands, he can't throw them very powerfully. He has to actually get down in stance, sit down a little bit before he throws it. And that's a huge telegraph for me, especially with a guy, with that kind of style. You kind of see it coming. So I use that, my movement, especially my lead leg a little bit to kind of keep him frustrated. And I could tell as the rounds got on, he started opening up a little bit, but they were kind of wild. And I was able to kind of, hit him, let him swing and miss, and I could counter off of him. He did hit me, I think, with one good left hand, nothing that really hurt, but you could see it when you go back and watch the fight. It was a lead hand hook, I believe. But that was really the only thing he hit me with.
Yeah, I mean, no offense to Masvidal, but if fighting Woodley twice in a row and getting knocked down by him didn't get you out of there, it's gonna be real hard to get you out of there by that finish.
Man, yeah, of course, nobody likes getting hit.
You never want to get punched. Listen, and you get hit. It doesn't matter. I don't care how good you are. You get hit in a soft part of your jaw when your legs aren't planted. If your foot's not planted and you get a hit in the soft part of your jaw, it doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter how good your cardio is. None of that matters. It's lights out. I mean, that's just how that works. And
at this level, and people don't understand when they're talking about winning fights, like, when I was coming up, everybody talks about that second Woodley fight as being boring. But when you're at the top of the game, you're fighting the top 5 guys, in, not just in the United States, it's in the world, man. These guys are the best fighters in the world. Coming up, of course, I had the great knockouts, but those guys weren't they weren't as good as these guys are. And so it's harder to make those flashy knockouts, but, to get those things to work, you have to go on the octagon intelligently. And, of course, the average fan just wants you to go out there, ball to the wall, and just swing for the fences. That's what it is, an entertainment sport. But at the same time, I want to be able to have conversations with my grandkids, 30 years down the road or whatever. Right. I don't want to be sitting there, drooling at the mouth.
Exactly.
So, and I to be honest with, especially with martial artists, I find it very fun to watch those type of fights. Guys who go out there and fight intelligently, even though it's not as flat or not as like Neanderthalish, walk out, just kind of banging it out. You can kind of see it's almost a type of finesse to watch that. It's like watching Roy Jones Jr. do his work back in the day. Of course, I don't know if he had his last fight.
He did. It was on Fight Pass. Yeah. Was it in Island, the promotion?
I believe so.
I think it was.
Yeah. I think it was. He's 49, almost 50.
Yep.
Still, man, he's got quick hands. Because I don't think the guy that he fought was, at the top, but he's just kind of.
Well, but he's also 50.
Fighter.
I mean, he's also 50. You're not supposed to be fighting guys at the top at that point.
Exactly. But man, dude, I was like, he was my idol growing up as well when it came to boxing. I studied that guy so much, especially, he fought with his hands down. And to be honest, he fought like a karate guy. Even though he was boxing, he was using karate movement out there in his boxing matches. And I just thought it was very fascinating. I learned a lot from him. Even though I never trained under him, I learned a lot from him.
I have a question. Did you ever idolize some of the so I've been doing this series where it's called MMA Yesterday, and I'm going back and watching UFC 1, UFC 2, UFC 3, and then we're doing a podcast. So I'm up to 7 now. This week we're recording the first Ultimate. And then next week we're going to get UFC 8, and we're going to have Gary Goodrich is going to be on, which is really cool, to talk about his UFC debut in UFC 8. If you remember that, it was the
he came out in a karate gi, right?
He did, yeah. He
came out in a black karate gi.
Yeah, and he got the guy in like kind of weird. It wasn't exactly a crucifix. It was something. It was like an inverted crucifix.
Yeah. On the backside. And
oh my gosh,
I thought the guy died.
I think everybody else did too. So yeah, are there any of the early karate guys? Because I mean, there was karate. There was also those I don't want to cuss. You're too wholesome to cuss around. BS. We'll say BS. There's like the BS martial arts that were there, which are just hilarious, especially like UFC 3. I mean, just some of these
oh my God,
they're just make believe martial arts, and it's guys. They all have mullets. I don't know what it was with make believe martial arts and a mullet, but they went hand in hand.
It worked, right? It was what it reminds me of. It reminds me. I don't know if you ever saw it, but Napoleon Dynamite.
Of course, I saw it.
Kwando.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's what literally.
Those are the UFC guys.
Well, if you remember, do you remember Joe Son?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
His martial art was Joe Son Do.
Oh my God!
So it literally is that. It's an exact example of that.
Well, I don't know if you know this, but I was at UFC 3. It was in there was 2 or 3 in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was where Kimo got his ponytail ripped out of his head or whatever. I was like 12. That was my very first UFC fight. My dad took me to. It was in Charlotte, North Carolina, and that was actually where I told my dad I was going to do that one day. And yeah, man. So I was there live.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I'm looking up real fast because I've done it. I've done all the UFCs up until UFC 7. So I'm trying to remember the one that was in North Carolina. I think it was UFC 3. I think UFC 3 was the one that was in North Carolina.
Yeah, it didn't hit any. And Kimo came out with a big cross on his back.
Yeah,
he carried it all the way to the cage. Yeah, I remember that, man.
It's the one where he lost a hoist.
The nuttiest. Yeah, exactly. He held on to his ponytail because there was no rules. I mean, they had no gloves. You could punch to the groin. You could grab hair. It was like gladiator fighting, man, like it was back in the day. Just absent the weapons, So that was my first experience of the UFC. Of course, I had, I don't remember their names. Of course, you had those, like you said, those fake karate guys out there, which really gave karate a bad name.
Oh, absolutely.
In that time, everybody would say karate wouldn't work, Of course, those are the guys that obviously have to jump out there. I was like, why couldn't there be like a legit karate guy out there back in the day? But when I first saw Lyoto Machida, I'm like, here's a guy that's going to bring karate back, that's going to make it popular. And he was actually, of course, it was years down the road, but he was actually my inspiration to even want to get, be in the UFC even more, was because of him. Like, man, karate's working. I know I can make this work.
Right.
And, of course, training with George and all those guys coming up and how, seeing how that style worked and kind of, made your opponent frustrated. I had to do a lot of modifications to it, sitting down in my stances, just because my first sparring session with George, I was on my butt 90% of the time.
Uh-huh.
He took me down so many times in the first round. I was down there, he would take me down, we'd stand back up. Next thing you know, I was back down. I'm like, dadgummit, I got to do something. But yeah, so Lyoto Machida was my inspiration, really. Of course, I loved watching Tank Abbott. I loved watching that guy fight.
I just watched his debut at UFC 6.
Wow. Oh, my God. That was UFC 6?
It was UFC 6.
Who did he fight? Do you remember?
UFC 6 debut. Oh, my gosh.
He knocked the guy out, right?
He did. He knocked him out and then mocked him. He knocked him out, and then he did the, stiff arms straight up in the air and mocked the guy.
Oh, my God.
Oh, my gosh. It was his debut. It was a guy named...
Dude.
Okay, here it is. John Maddu was the guy's name. And then after then he advanced. He fought Paul Varlins, which if you remember Paul Varlins, he was the really, really tall guy. And then he went to the finals and had a 17.
Now that was the guy he tried to throw out of the cage, right?
Yes,
it
was Paul Varlins.
Throw that guy out of the cage.
He pinned him up against the cage. He stuck his knee. He jammed his knee into his face. It was kneeing him in the face and laughing at the crowd. Dude, he was a monster.
Man.
He was a monster.
He was, dude.
Yeah, he was
and
a
monster.
monster.
He was a street fighter.
Yep.
He was a street fighter. That's what was so cool.
He
He had to take down. Oh my gosh, yeah, no, I wouldn't want to stand out there with the big goatee. He looked like a biker dude, like like part of the Hells Angels or something.
Well, my favorite guy you got to watch fight. My favorite guy is Harold Howard. I'm in love with the man.
Yeah.
I'm in love with the man. He was at UFC 3. He's the guy who Hoist was supposed to fight. Hoist goes into the cage, and the fight never starts. The team throws in the towel.
Because he was so beat up, right?
Because he got so beat up in the chemo fight. So Howard winds up advancing, and then you have Steve Jinham, the guy who wound up winning UFC 3, hadn't
he was
fought.
He was like a ninja guy, right?
He was ninjutsu, yep, and he did not fight. Ninjutsu, right?
Why?
He didn't fight.
I know, he would have.
So Keith Hackney.
Why did that happen? How'd that happen?
So
Do you remember why that did?
Yeah. So Keith Hackney beats up Emmanuel Yarbrough, who's a sumo guy, the second sumo guy you had seen in the UFC. Keith Hackney wins, gets hurt. Ken Shamrock advances, okay, and then an alternate steps in, and Felix Mitchell. The alternates did not fight. So the way as the UFC continued, they had those guys fight. The alternates. The alternates would have to fight, you win, and then you potentially get on the card if someone gets injured. But before UFC 3, that's not how it worked. They had a couple guys that were in the crowd who knew that if they got to fill in, they got to fill in. So then Ken Shamrock fights Felix Mitchell, beats Felix Mitchell, but then Ken Shamrock gets injured. So now the second alternate comes in, and Steve Jinham. So Steve Jinham fights in the finals, having not fought for the entire night, and wins UFC 3.
Oh my God.
Yes. And he then fights in UFC
fresh.
4.
He was legit fresh.
He was legit fresh, and he was awful. Steve Jinham was terrible. I mean, he was just terrible.
Oh, I know.
I don't know if he ever won again. He was terrible. But yeah, he goes on, and I made a joke on the podcast that Steve Jinham then goes on and actually defends the belt, which means that Steve Jinham, because we got to make a Conor joke anytime we can. Steve Jinham has defended a UFC title more than Conor McGregor. So that's the stat, man. He defended the title at UFC 4. Technically, he was a UFC title holder at the time he defended it. So there you go. There's that stat.
Wow.
So that's the one you were at. That was in North Carolina. There it is.
Yeah, man. That was it, dude. I mean, that was that was almost like still underground. Nobody really,
for sure.
Nobody really watched it. It was underground. I think you could only get it on pay-per-view.
It was banned in 18 states. I mean, so many states had banned it. Yep.
Oh my God. And that was the stuff to watch, man. Like from then on, who would have thought that it would be where it's at today?
I know. It's incredible.
You know what I mean?
That's the one of the first things, because I had never watched a lot of this old stuff. Or I'd seen bits and pieces, but it never, because the way that I'm doing it for the series is I'm watching it beginning to end. I'm watching all the commentary, all the post-fight interviews. Like, I'm watching it I'm watching it as if I was watching it on a pay-per-view at the time. So I'm watching everything. I'm not just watching the fights. So, and I'm learning a lot. It's insane the amount I've learned just through the 7 of them. And one of the things I thought after UFC 1 was, holy shit, how did this keep going? How did this keep going? How did this not get shut down? And then you get through a couple more UFCs and you're like, how is this still going? I mean, it's just bonkers, the stuff that's happening. But we're already getting to the point now where there's more rules. Stuff has calmed down a little bit. But then Take Abbott comes out of nowhere and has one of the most violent looking fights you've ever seen up to this point. And you're like, it's going to get banned again. But nope, here we go. Just keeps chugging along. And now we're here. Now we are where we are. Yep. All right. I know you got to go. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you these 2 things. Feel free to give me as brief of an answer as possible. One, obviously thumb injuries, right? Before your last fight, obviously you have the knee. So where are you now? How are you feeling?
Thumbs are getting better. Obviously, they're getting stronger. I had it. What was going on was I ended up breaking my thumbs. Didn't do anything with them. The doctor wanted to put a pin in my right thumb because I ended up tearing the ligament. But if I put the pin in my thumb, I won't physically be able to make a fist.
Ooh.
So that's career ending. I got to be able to make a fist in order to fight. So I'm doing physical therapy now. I'm going to see a physical therapist 3 times a week. And we're doing strengthening stuff. The joint feels better. It's just building the muscle up around it so I'm able to grab. I wasn't able to use my thumbs for 3 months. And muscles, I could literally, if I grabbed your wrist, it would feel like I'm just laying my hand on your wrist. That's how weak that grip is. Just be able to build it up. So I'm doing a lot of exercises, a lot of rice exercises, trying to build up my forearms and my thumbs at this point. So, there's a lot of things going on in the welterweight division. Of course, everybody was, the fans were really wanting me to fight Darren Till. But the UFC kind of wanted me to do it at really short notice, like 3 weeks. I've been working one in London or coming up, and I just wouldn't be able to do it, I want to be able to go out there 100%. Of course, you're never 100% when you step out there.
Oh, yeah.
But,
more you'd like to be more closer to 100% than you are.
Exactly. And Chris Weidman ended up messing the ligament up in his. He had surgery on his, and it was just a disaster. So he's out even longer. I just don't want that to happen, So I think me taking the time off to be able to get those thumbs right, I'll be able to fight sooner than going out there fighting and injuring myself even more and then being out even longer. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So they're feeling strong, but man, I was really trying for the longest time to get that RDA fight. It looks like it's not happening, but now you got Tyron wanting to, calling out Nate Diaz again. I don't know if that's true. If it's false. Oh my gosh, it's going crazy, man.
Right, your division's falling apart around you, man. No, it's a good division. It's a good division. I mean, yeah. I don't get nearly as upset about those guys. So, because I'm like, whatever. You have such a finite career that if you want to try to call, I'm sure you're going to disagree with me wholly, and that's perfectly fine. But it's like if you got a finite career, if you can get a fight like a Diaz fight, and that is going to bring a lot of eyeballs. Although I would say that I don't think the fight's going to bring as many eyeballs as people think it is.
That's what I'm saying.
I think no offense, but I think Diaz is very dependent on Conor to get those level numbers that people are acting like he's going to be able to get it. I'm like, let's all settle down a little bit. I don't know if a Woodley Diaz fight is doing nearly what we think it's going to do. I would watch it. It'd be interesting. It would definitely do more than most fights, but at the same time, it's not going to be some crazy super fight. I mean, that's not what that fight is. It's people are far more interested in seeing Diaz Conor 3 than and then there's about 100 feet, and then there's this fight. I mean, it's just really not even close to that.
I agree with you, man.
Yeah, I mean, the fight I want to see, obviously, is you getting back into some type of title eliminator. I mean, really, that's what it's going to come down to. I mean, Woodley's not going to be champion forever, and I understand that people don't want to necessarily see a third fight as so soon. But I mean, listen, if you're the number 1 contender, then that's what you are. So you got to run it back. But obviously, you got to get at least another win or two here to get back in that position.
I agree.
But yeah, so I mean, if you had, and last but not least, I mean, if you had anybody that you could keep your sights on and that you'd like to have in 6 months or so, I mean, where are you looking?
Literally, I mean, the only guy that I can see really is, one of the top 5 guys. Of course, I'm number 1. RDA is number 2. I know it doesn't work like it did when I was coming up, but, you never know because you got Tyron asking for different things. So if RDA is just sitting there, fight the number 1 guy. Yeah, I come up, I went through Murder's Row, and then I had to fight the number 1 guy to get that title shot. So hopefully we'll get that. You will get that working. If he's sitting long enough, he's going to want to fight. That's the plan. The plan is to really see what Tyron's going to do. If he gets somebody else, then give me RDA, man.
I like it. That's your focus. So let's make it happen. I mean, I imagine, I think he's booked or going to be booked pretty soon. I think. But I think the fight to make for them is just to do RDA Colby and have it in Brazil and just call it a day and just let that freak show play out. Again, you do not have to agree with me on that because you shouldn't. But I'm a fan of freak shows, so I'm like, whatever. Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do.
Hey man, I love it. I like where your head's at.
All right, I held you on here too long. Let's get you out of here, man. If there's anything else you want to say, please do so, and then I'll get you out of here.
Well, man, to be honest with you, I just want to thank you for having me on, my friend.
Oh, for sure.
And I love
Always
talking with you, love chatting with you, and we got to do it again. So
absolutely, man. All right, enjoy yourself.
Thank you, my friend. Have a good one.
Yep. See ya.
See you, brother.